Was I wrong for refusing to give my stepson my son's bedroom? I'm 39. I have one son, who is 15. For 10 years, it was just the two of us. We have a rhythm. We have a bond. I bought this house 5 years before I even met my husband. It's a 4-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood. When I bought it, I imagined my son growing up here, having his friends over, and eventually leaving for college from this very front door. It was our sanctuary. Then I met my husband, who is 42. He has 3 kids from a previous marriage, twin boys, now 15, and a daughter, 12. We fell in love, and 4 years ago we got married. After a lot of discussion, we decided it made the most sense for them to move into my house. Selling a 4-bedroom house that I had a great mortgage on didn't make sense, especially since his apartment was too small for all of us anyway. From day one, the room arrangements were clear. My son stayed in the room he's had since he was 5. It's the largest of the non-master bedrooms. The twins were put together in the second largest room. The 12-year-old daughter got the smallest room. At the time, everyone seemed okay with it. The twins were 11 then. They had always shared a room at their mom's and at their dad's apartment. It was their normal. The first year was the honeymoon phase, but as the boys hit puberty, the friction started. It wasn't just typical brotherly shoving. It became psychological. One of the twins, I'll call him Twin A, is a borrower. And by borrower, I mean he believes that personal property is a collective concept. He doesn't ask. He just takes. It started small. A hoodie would go missing from my son's closet. My son would find it in the twins' room, crumpled under a bed, smelling like someone else's deodorant. Then it was a charging cable. Then a pair of expensive sneakers. Every time my son confronted Twin A would shrug and say, "We're family now, what's the big deal?" My husband's reaction was always the same. He's just a kid. They're still adjusting to the merger. Don't make him feel like an outsider. About 18 months ago, things hit a breaking point. My son had been saving his birthday money and chore money in a jar on his desk. He's a saver. He wanted a specific high-end gaming monitor. One day, he came to me white-faced. The jar was empty. Nearly $200 was gone. We found the money in Twin A's backpack. He hadn't even spent it all. He just wanted it. My husband's response? He made Twin A give the money back and told him not to do it again. No grounded time. No loss of electronics. Nothing. That was the day I went to the hardware store and bought a deadbolt for my son's door. I installed it myself. When my husband saw it, he was livid. He said it was offensive and that it sent a message to his children that they were criminals. I told him that until his children stopped acting like criminals, my son deserved to know his things were safe. The lock stayed. Over the last 6 months, the environment in the twins' room has become toxic. They are 15 now. They are big kids. They have zero privacy from each other. Twin B is the opposite of Twin A. He's studious, quiet, and values his space. Twin A is loud, messy, and constantly provokes his brother. The fighting is constant. It starts at 7 a.m. over whose turn it is to use the desk and ends at 11 p.m. over the lights being on. Last week, Twin A broke Twin B's laptop during a scuffle. Not an accident. He slammed the lid down so hard the screen shattered. My husband came to me 3 days ago, looking completely defeated. He sat me down and said, "I can't take the fighting anymore. It's ruining my relationship with my boys. It's making the house a war zone." I agreed. I told him we needed to look into therapy for Twin A, or maybe a more rigid disciplinary structure. Then he dropped the bomb. "No, the problem is the room. They need to be separated. I've thought about it, and the only fair thing is to move Twin A into your son's room. They can share that big space, and Twin B can have the other room to himself. It solves everything." I felt the blood leave my face. "Absolutely not," I said. He looked shocked, which honestly shocked me. Did he really think I would say yes? "Why not?" he asked. "Your son has a huge room. There's plenty of space for 2 beds. It would literally stop the screaming overnight." "It wouldn't stop the screaming," I replied. "It would just move the screaming into my son's room. You're asking me to take the child who steals, breaks things, and doesn't respect boundaries, and put him in the one place my son feels safe. My son has a lock on his door for a reason. You want to remove that barrier entirely?" My husband's tone shifted. It went from asking for help to accusing me of bias. He started talking about how he pays his share of the bills, which he does, and how we are supposed to be a blended family. "You always talk about your son and my kids," he snapped. "They are supposed to be our kids. But you treat your son like a prince with a private suite, while my boys are crammed into a room like sardines. It's blatant favoritism. If we were a real family, we would share the resources we have. I pointed out the reality. This house is my son's childhood home. He has had that room for 10 years. He shouldn't have to pay the price for your son's inability to behave. If twin A can't get along with his own twin brother, what makes you think he'll get along with my son, who he already has a history of stealing from? I tried to offer alternatives. I suggested we convert the downstairs den into a bedroom for twin A. It's a decent-sized room, but it doesn't have a closet. We have to use an armoire. He said no, he didn't want his son banished to the ground floor away from everyone else. I suggested moving his 12-year-old daughter in with one of the twins, since they're still young enough that it might work with a room divider, and giving the other twin the small room. He looked at me like I was insane. Put a 12-year-old girl in a room with a 15-year-old boy? Absolutely not. That's inappropriate. I pointed out that his daughter's room is actually larger than the den. We could move the daughter to the den and give a twin her room. He shot that down too, saying his daughter deserves her privacy and shouldn't have to move just because her brothers fight. So, in his mind, the only person who should have to sacrifice is my son. The only person whose privacy doesn't matter is the child who didn't cause the problem. The argument escalated into a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of being possessive of the house because I owned it before him. He said I hold it over his head. I told him I wasn't holding the house over his head. I was holding the standard of parenting over his head. You aren't trying to solve a room issue, I told him. You're trying to avoid a discipline issue. You'd rather take the easy way out by infringing on my son than actually sit twin it down and deal with his behavior. He packed a bag right then and there. He told me he couldn't live in a house where his children were second-class citizens. He told me that my refusal to move twin A into my son's room was the hill my marriage was going to die on. He's been gone since Tuesday night. He's been texting me intermittently, not asking how I am, but asking if I've come to my senses. He says he won't bring his kids back into an environment where they feel unwanted. The kids are currently at their mother's for her scheduled week, but they're due back here Sunday. My son knows what's going on. He's 15, he's not stupid. He saw the bags packed. He heard the shouting. Yesterday, he came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. Mom, he said, if he moves in here, I'm moving my PC into your room. I'm serious. I won't leave my stuff in there with him. I looked at him, and I saw the anxiety in his eyes. He shouldn't have to feel like he's under siege in his own home. He's a good kid. He gets good grades, he's quiet, he's respectful. And he's being told that because his stepbrothers can't stop hitting each other, he has to give up his peace. I feel like I'm being gaslit. My husband's friends' wives have apparently heard his side of the story, because I got a well-meaning message from one of them saying that in a marriage, everything is 50-50, and sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the family. Is this the greater good? Or is this just me allowing my husband to steamroll my son because he's tired of parenting his own? I love my husband, but I am looking at this situation, and I don't see a way out where everyone is happy. If I give in, my son will resent me forever. He will feel like I chose my husband over him. If I don't give in, my husband might actually leave for good. The twins are supposed to come back in 2 days. The house is quiet now, but I know the moment those boys walk through the door, the tension will return. And without my husband here to manage them, I'll be the one stuck in the middle of the chaos he says he can't live with. It feels like a trap. He left so that I would experience the full force of his boys fighting alone, hoping I'd get so desperate for peace that I'd agree to his plan. It's a power play. I'm standing my ground. I told him this morning via text. The den is available. We can buy a closet system today. That is the only room move I will agree to. My son's room is his. End of discussion. He hasn't replied. Am I the a-hole? Am I being too rigid? Should I be more blended and force my son to share? Or is my husband's solve actually just a way to make my son the sacrificial lamb for his own kids' behavioral issues? I keep thinking about the equal treatment argument. If the roles were reversed, if my son was the one stealing and fighting, would I ask my husband's kids to give up their space? The answer is no. I would deal with my son. I would take away his things, I would put him in counseling, I would find a way to make it work in the space he had. I wouldn't make an innocent party pay the price. My husband calls it selfishness. I call it protection. What makes it harder is that I do care about the twins. I want them to be happy. I want them to have their own space. But I won't take it from my son. My son didn't ask for a blended family. He didn't ask for step-siblings who don't respect his property. He accepted them into his home, and now he's being told that his home isn't actually his. I'm waiting for the garage door to open, hoping it's my husband coming back to apologize and talk about the den. But deep down, I think he's waiting for me to break. And I don't think I'm going to. Update. The twins came back Sunday afternoon exactly when they were supposed to. My husband still hadn't returned, and by that point the silence between us felt heavier than the actual argument. He hadn't replied to my last message about the den. No acknowledgement, no counterargument, nothing. Just absence. I picked the kids up from their mom's place because that was the arrangement for that week. The car ride was tense in a quiet, uncomfortable way. Their sister chatted a little about school projects and a friend's birthday party, clearly trying to fill space. Twin B mostly stared out the window. Twin A had headphones on but wasn't listening to anything. I could see the screen dark when the light hit it. They all knew something was wrong. Teenagers always know more than adults think. The moment we pulled into the driveway, Twin A asked where their dad was. I told them he was staying with a friend for a few days and that the adults were working through a disagreement. I kept my tone neutral. I wasn't going to drag them into it. Twin B just nodded like he'd expected that answer. Twin A rolled his eyes and muttered something about another fight, which told me this wasn't new territory for them. The house felt different with them back. Louder, immediately. Shoes dropped in the hallway, doors opening and closing, overlapping voices. My son stayed upstairs longer than usual, waiting for the initial wave of noise to settle. When he finally came down, he greeted everyone politely, but there was caution in his posture. He hovered near me in the kitchen longer than normal, like he was checking whether the ground beneath him was still stable. That first evening went better than I expected. Dinner was calm. Homework happened. For a few hours, it almost felt normal again. I allowed myself to think maybe the break had cooled things down. That illusion lasted until about 9:30. It started with raised voices from the twins' room. At first it sounded like regular arguing over a charger. Then something hit the wall hard enough that I felt it through the floorboards. Their sister froze mid-sentence while talking to me. My son glanced upstairs and quietly excused himself, retreating to his room before things escalated further. I went upstairs and knocked once before opening the twins' door. Clothes were scattered everywhere, one chair overturned. Twin B looked furious in a restrained, shaking way. Twin A looked energized, almost amused by the reaction he'd gotten. The argument was about headphones this time. Twin B insisted they were his. Twin A insisted that sharing was normal and his brother was overreacting. The same pattern, different object. I separated them and told them both to cool off. Twin B grabbed his backpack and left the room, choosing to sit at the kitchen table instead. Twin A flopped onto his bed like nothing had happened. Standing there, I realized something uncomfortable. My husband hadn't exaggerated the chaos. The fighting really was constant. But seeing it firsthand without him there also made something else clear. The issue wasn't space alone. It was behavior, boundaries, and a dynamic that had been allowed to grow unchecked for years. Later that night, my son knocked on my bedroom door. He didn't come in right away, just leaned against the frame. He asked quietly if the room change was still happening. I told him no. Nothing had changed. He nodded, but he didn't look relieved right away. It took a few seconds for the tension to leave his shoulders. That delay hit me harder than anything else. He genuinely believed his home could be rearranged around him without his consent. He admitted he'd already started thinking about which things he could move into storage if he had to share. He'd even unplugged part of his setup earlier just in case. Hearing that made my stomach drop. The argument between adults had already reached him more deeply than I realized. Monday morning brought another issue. Twin B approached me before school while Twin A was still upstairs. He asked, carefully choosing his words, whether there was any chance he could move into a different room. He didn't mention my son's room specifically. He just said he couldn't concentrate anymore and felt like he never got a break. He looked exhausted. Dark circles, tense posture, the kind of quiet frustration that comes from living in constant conflict. That conversation stuck with me all day. It reinforced that Twin B wasn't the problem, yet he was suffering the consequences too. My husband framed the situation as fairness between households, but fairness inside the twins' relationship wasn't being addressed at all. That afternoon, I finally received a message from my husband. It wasn't an apology or even a question. It was a long paragraph explaining that the boys had called him and told him the fighting had already started again. He ended it by saying, "Now you see why something has to change." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Because yes, I saw the problem clearly. But what I saw wasn't what he thought I would. I told him the fighting-proof structure and consequences were missing, not that my son's room needed to be sacrificed. His reply came faster this time. He accused me of refusing to compromise and said I was forcing him to choose between his children and his marriage. That wording bothered me more than the accusation itself. No one had asked him to choose. The only thing being refused was one specific solution. The week continued like that, small explosions followed by uneasy calm. Twin A pushed boundaries constantly. Borrowed food without asking, entered rooms without knocking, dismissed rules as suggestions. When corrected, he reacted with sarcasm rather than remorse. It wasn't malicious in an obvious way. It was dismissive, like consequences simply didn't apply to him. By Wednesday, another incident happened that changed the tone of everything. My son came downstairs holding a controller, visibly upset, but trying to stay composed. He explained that while he'd been showering, someone had tried his bedroom door handle repeatedly. The lock held. He checked his hallway camera afterward, something we'd installed months ago after the money incident, and it showed Twin A testing the knob. When confronted, Twin A claimed he just wanted to ask a question and forgot to knock. That explanation didn't hold up well against video evidence of multiple attempts. I sat him down at the kitchen table and had the first serious one-on-one conversation we'd ever had without my husband present. I explained calmly, but firmly, that trying to enter someone's locked room crossed a boundary. I told him trust wasn't automatic. It was built through consistent behavior. He shrugged at first, but when I told him privileges would be restricted until trust improved, devices limited, shared spaces monitored, his attitude shifted quickly into anger. He accused me of treating him differently than my son. I didn't raise my voice. I told him consequences follow actions, not labels. If my son behaved the same way, he'd face consequences too. That conversation ended with him storming off, but something about it felt necessary. For the first time, there was an actual boundary paired with a clear response. That evening my husband called instead of texting. The conversation started tense and escalated quickly. He said I had no right to discipline his son without him present. I reminded him that he wasn't present because he chose to leave. He insisted the environment proved his point and asked again if I'd reconsider the room arrangement. I said no. There was a long silence on the phone after that. Not angry silence, tired silence. He admitted he didn't know how to handle Twin A anymore. That was the first honest thing I'd heard from him since the argument began. He sounded worn down, not just frustrated with me, but overwhelmed as a parent. That shifted something in the conversation. I told him I wasn't against helping his children. I was against solving the problem by transferring it onto mine. We talked longer than we had in days. Not perfectly, not peacefully, but more honestly. I suggested family counseling again, and this time he didn't immediately reject it. He didn't agree either, but he didn't shut it down. After we hung up, I realized the fight had never truly been about square footage. It was about fear. He was afraid of failing his child. I was afraid of failing mine. The following days remained difficult, but a pattern started emerging. With consistent rules in place, the fights didn't disappear, yet they shortened. Twin B began spending more time downstairs voluntarily, working at the dining table, where things felt calmer. My son relaxed slightly once it became clear his room wasn't being negotiated behind his back. By Saturday, my husband finally came by to pick up some clothes. The meeting was awkward. We spoke in the kitchen while the kids stayed upstairs. Neither of us jumped back into the argument immediately. He looked around the house like he was seeing it differently. Maybe noticing the routines that continued without him. Maybe realizing the chaos hadn't magically forced me to change my mind. We talked quietly. No yelling this time. He admitted leaving had been partly an attempt to make me understand how stressful the fighting felt. I told him it had only made the house feel unstable for everyone else. We didn't resolve everything that day. He didn't move back in. But he also didn't repeat the ultimatum. Before leaving, he asked if the den idea was still on the table. I told him yes. Always had been. He nodded slowly, like he was finally considering it instead of rejecting it outright. That night, after the house settled, I sat alone in the living room thinking about how close everything had come to breaking. The situation still isn't fixed. The twins still argue. My husband and I are still working through resentment that doesn't disappear overnight. But one thing became very clear through all of this. My son's sense of security was never negotiable. Protecting that didn't mean rejecting the rest of the family. It meant refusing to solve one child's problem by creating another's. I don't know yet whether my marriage will fully recover. I don't know if counseling will help or if deeper parenting disagreements will surface again. What I do know is that standing firm didn't destroy the family the way I feared. If anything, it forced the real problem into the open where it couldn't be avoided anymore. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.